Where's my snap camera not working? Okay, hi, can everyone hear me? Testing. Oh yes, I like my shirt too. Okay, we'll wait a couple more minutes for the rest to join. I apologize for the resolution today because I was playing with my settings. The problem is with my home setup. You can't see it, but actually you can see it. Let me turn my camera. This is how it looks, which is why we have a problem because yeah, I didn't account for my 34-inch monitor screwing up the resolution. So yeah, I will fix that the next time. But I'm sorry about the sizing of the screen today. I will get that fixed the next time I see you. Yeah, here, this is how my work area looks, which is why it's a bit, yeah, the resolution is kind of screwed up. Disadvantages of having too many huge monitors. Actually, yeah, I look like I have like 3 laptops, 2 monitors, and a desktop, iPad, and Google Home. It looks like I'm running some kind of giant crime syndicate or something. Um, you like Boris? What? I mean, yeah, I have mixed feelings about him being ICU. I should keep them to myself. Okay, if any of your classmates still have trouble joining, do send them the direct links. I have WhatsApp all the classes. For AO1 S24, it's in the what's that chat? The History Reps chat. Ah yes, I was just watching Money Heist last night, Kevin. The professor is actually the best, the greatest guy at working from home. Yeah, he's always in a van somewhere. Okay, my laptop positioning is also a bit off. This is a bit awkward. I'm gonna rejig my setup after today. Never mind, first time at home. Okay, great, we have 76 now, just about 10 more. Okay, so how's everyone? Second day of full home-based learning. Let's just say that I already went out yesterday to tapao food and also to collect some deliveries. Yeah, today I'll do 2 things. As Rachel has mentioned, I'll do a block exam first. That will take about 10-15 minutes, and then I'll finish up UN Peacekeeping after the Cold War. That will take about 15-20 minutes. Yeah, we have been told to not try to stuff too many things into our home-based learning e-lessons, which is why I'm going to keep it shorter because, yeah, there's also an exit pass, a short quiz for y'all to do after this, and we want to make sure that you're in time for your next period. So it will be shorter than your usual lectures. Ah, yes, nice axe. I like it too. You know what I want to do, right? Is I want to use my Apple Pencil and iPad to create another tab in this screen where I can show a whiteboard at the same time. Okay, next week I should have that working, so it will be much better. Do you know what I was busy with the last few days? Oh, I nearly died, man. I slept at like 3 a.m. last night. Doing your bloody attendance system. That Google form that you fill in every morning, yeah. Do you know how many formulas there are at the back end to calculate like attendance? But I think I finally got it done. So I'm strangely proud of myself right now. Oh, what props do I have with me today? Okay, give me a moment. I have Pen. Yeah, I should hug Pen as I lecture. Oh. Okay, anyway, let's begin. Okay, Pen is here to lighten the mood a bit. Since you're gonna do your block exam. Okay, as you know, I marked the essays for most of the classes, while Mr. Lok marked the essays for AO1 and S24. But not to worry, we spoke to each other a lot in how we marked, and we kind of standardized how we wanted to approach this time, which you will hear about it later. Okay, so if you have your block exam scripts with you, it will be very useful. I'll be looking at question 2 and 3, basically your essays. They are very similar questions, so I will talk about them together. Okay. Circuit breaker, yes. Yeah. As I was telling some of your classes, right? The name is brilliant. Yeah. The acronym is brilliant. CB. Just imagine one day where they need to up the measures even further. It becomes complete circuit breaker. CCB. Just like your exam grades, a lot of y'all were in the CB range. Why am I saying that so much? I have no idea, but I'm getting a kick out of it. Yeah, panda mating. Panda mating is a very interesting thing. Apparently, pandas are only fertile for like 2 days a year. So when you need them to mate, right, basically they have to do it there and then. So it's very intense. They have to try to get them to get it done within the few hours of those 2 days. So it's always quite an experience. Okay, anyway, back to business. Let's get on to business. I'll be looking at the block exam first. So first of all, am I disappointed? Honestly, not really. Okay, because not that it was bad. It was quite okay actually. I felt comfortable with how you all performed for the essays. Mr. Lok did as well. It was not that bad. Okay, I think Ms. Zakia will have a lot more things to say about your source base. Okay, that was quite disastrous, but the essay wasn't too bad, honestly. And I think we can all take heart from that, yeah, most of you are probably on the right track when it comes to essays. Just need some tweaking here and there and finish them. Okay, that's always very, very important. Okay, so moving on. Let's get Pen into view. Okay, marks and what they mean, as always. Here are the marks. You have gotten back all your scripts yesterday already, so you already know what you got. Performance this time was okay, I guess. The essays kind of pulled a lot of your up, okay, as you'll hear from me later as well. So let's have a review of how you did for the UN essays. I think overall it was average, kind of okay lah. It was okay this time. But I would also like you all to note that the questions were really super easy. Okay, and both Mr. Lok and myself decided that we wanted to give you an accurate gauge of the A levels, and we were not very strict this time. We were actually pretty lenient. Okay, which means that you probably won't expect much more than what you have already gotten if you wrote like this at the A levels. It's around there already. We didn't mark stricter in any sense. Okay, so which is why I think quite a number of you managed to get L4, L5. That means 17, 21, 22, 25, which are very good grades. Those of you who are not there, I mean, there's always room for improvement as well. Okay, but do note that we didn't mark strictly this time, and the questions were pretty much quite okay. Okay, the two questions we had for y'all, one was on the Secretary Generals and one was on the Security Council, but they are both very similar questions. They are both what we call cause and effect questions. Okay, to what extent was the international climate of the day the main cause for the failures of the United Nations Secretary Generals from 1945 to 2000, and the UN Security Council has been ineffective since 45 due to the veto system? Both cause and effect questions, both very, very similar, and both actually very, very easy. All you had to do, and which is what many of you did as well, was to, for instance, for Q2, you talk about how international climate, like Cold War, post-Cold War, affected the Secretary Generals, and then after that, you bring in other factors. That's it. Some of you also talked about how it doesn't necessarily always cause them to fail. Some of them managed to work around it, which is fine too. Okay, we accepted that. Q3, the UN Security Council has been ineffective due to the veto. Again, address the assumption, the given factor of the question, the veto system, then bring in other factors. You can also question how much did the veto actually affect everything. Did it always necessarily affect the UN Security Council? So that is totally valid as well. Okay, so that was what we accepted. Did you ever see my keyboard? My keyboard is really nice, by the way. This is my keyboard. No, it has backlight as well, but you can't really see the backlight. I turned it off. Okay, let's move on. So, first thing I want to say with regards to the essay question is please manage your time carefully. Okay? There were really quite a lot of incomplete essays, which we both felt, me and Mr. Lok felt, was a real waste. That means you didn't have enough GAs or paragraphs. Okay? Remember that you need the intro, 4 paragraphs, preferably 2 support and 2 challenge, and a conclusion. Watch your time management and don't shortchange yourself. I think some of you only managed to get half an essay done. That means only 2 paragraphs, which, yeah, as I said, don't shortchange yourself. Even though some of you had pretty good quality paragraphs, there were just too few of them. So you really want to try to cover more and try to finish your essays. That is always very important. Okay, next up, the next comment I have is with regards to your evidence. Okay, now, one thing I really want you all to note when it comes to evidence is there are 2 angles to this. When you give evidence, you want 2 things. You want specifics and you want scope in your evidence. Both are necessary. Okay? So, when you give evidence, what I mean by specifics is do not just name drop. That means when you give examples, don't just say, oh, like Somalia. Oh, like Rwanda. Oh, like in Bosnia. Oh, like in the Suez Crisis and Congo. You need to actually elaborate a bit on them. Okay, you need to elaborate on your examples a bit. A couple of sentences. Tell me, what is it about? Korean War, the veto issue. How does the veto issue come into play during the Korean War? Or trigger Lee during the Korean War. Again, how does, superpower rivalry during the Korean War affect trigger Lee? That means you need to actually explain your evidence a bit. Okay, that is very, very important. Do not just name drop. That is what I mean when you see on your script specifics, elaboration. Give some specific examples. That's what I mean. You want to ensure that your evidence is sufficiently specific, elaborate a bit on it, and tell me how it fits whatever point you are making. Okay, don't forget about that. The next big point I want to make about your evidence is scope. Use a variety of examples. Do not keep repeating the same things. Yes, occasionally you can reuse some examples, but don't keep doing it. Some of you, your entire essay had pretty much 2 examples. Sometimes none, no. It was just so vague and not enough scope. You need to rotate around the different examples you use a bit. Okay, so remember, specific examples and also scope of examples. Use a variety of examples and do explain and elaborate them a bit. Some of the classes were better at this because this usually comes from studying. Like for instance, I can tell that I think AO3, AO6, and AO1 S24 generally had better evidence. Less smoky in a sense. Actually, AO5 also, yeah. Some of the other classes, you're seriously smoky. You need some more concrete evidence in them. Okay, do not just name drop examples. Some of you had pretty good arguments, but you were just name dropping examples all the way. That means you never really elaborated on your evidence at all, which is unfortunate lah. Okay, it's very damaging as well. Okay, so you want to avoid that. Next up, finally, the third big issue I want to talk about is your evaluation and CA, comparative analysis or counter argument. Very few of you bothered to evaluate and CA much. That means very few of you bothered to elaborate and weigh the factors much, which is unfortunate once again. A lot of you had some kind of stand in your introduction, but it was not fully explained. Then in your body paragraphs itself, when you evaluated, you didn't truly weigh the factors. You had some inkling or hint at it, but you never truly actually made the factors fight against each other to lead back to your stand of why your stand outweighs the other factors. So don't forget this. It is very important. Remember that you need to weigh your factors and come to an overall judgment. It's not just a matter of restating your stand in every paragraph. It's also not just a matter of narrating all the way. Okay, some of you, I think a couple of classes had this habit of narrating too much without evaluating, weighing the factors and linking back to your stand. So don't forget that at the end of the day, once you have enough evidence, evaluation is really what gets you the marks. Evaluation, comparative analysis, counter arguments, weighing the factors is what gets you the marks. So let's not forget that. It is more important than you think, especially when you are shooting for the higher bands of marks. Okay, so keep these 3 things in mind for the essay segment. Firstly, the time management, incomplete essays thing, do try to finish. You want to balance and manage your time better. Secondly, your evidence needs to have scope, and you also need to elaborate and give some specifics. Do not just name drop. Finally, in terms of evaluation, remember to weigh. In the paragraphs which are not on your stand, you want to weigh the different factors and link back to what your overall thesis is. Okay, Atreya was saying, were there any cases of if evaluations? Yes, if you did that, I will circle it and say don't speculate. So avoid that, don't speculate. Rachel says, how do I distinguish mere narration and specifics? I think that, it's a matter of not going too far when you give evidence. That means when you give an example, right, you want to get to the gist of it. That means zoom into the part of the example that helps you make your point. Let's say you're making a point about how even Hammarskjöld was affected by the superpower rivalry despite him being a pretty good SecGen during the Congo crisis. You do not need to give me a lot of background about the Congo crisis. What you want to do is to zoom in on the specific bits that show how superpower rivalry affected Hammarskjöld during the Congo crisis. Like, he was accused of bias after Lumumba died, and how the Soviet Union started accusing him of bias as a result of that, not protecting Lumumba enough, and then started calling for his replacement with a troika. So this shows how superpower rivalry also affected even stronger secretary generals like Hammarskjöld. So zoom in on the thing you need. You don't need to narrate from start to end. This is actually a very good point because some of you have too much also, while some of you have too little. So it's really a matter of striking a balance. Okay, not just name drop, but also don't just keep narrating. It's about achieving a balance. Zoom into what you need to prove that particular point in your paragraph. Okay, that's all I have for the essays for your block tests. And on the whole, I would say that I was okay with them. Mr. Lok was as well. Okay, it's not disastrous by any means, so I think we should all take heart from that, especially as we go into this period of home-based learning, because we are still going to be doing essays for a while for the rest of the UN and also global economy. We both think that, okay lah, y'all know how to do it lah. It's just a matter of tweaking and improving along the way. Okay, I think Ms. Zakia will have a lot more things to say about your Southeast Asia source base, because I marked a couple of them as well. I had a look at them as well, and oh my god, man, I nearly choked on the smog. It's Singapore, Malaysia, and some of you are, yeah, it's like don't even know what's going on near your home. Okay, I'm gonna switch to my UN lecture next. Okay, so I'm almost done with the UN actually. I have one last case study left for the post-Coa period that I didn't manage to finish the last time. And then after that is done, I will do a summary of everything. Okay. Hao Jin's question. Ah, okay. Sorry. I didn't see that. How do we weigh? Do we weigh? Okay, Hao Jin's question is also very important. When do you do the weighing? You do it everywhere. That means you do it in the initial thesis, a bit of explanation there. Then, in the paragraphs that are not on your stand, you do it at the end of each paragraph that isn't on your stand, and then finally wrap everything up in your conclusion. That would ensure that you have what we call a consistent argument. That means you have a clear thesis with some kind of judgment weighing in your introduction, and then in your body paragraphs itself, you always link back to it. So on the paragraphs that are not on your stand, you weigh, and then you link back to your stand. And then finally, in a conclusion, you wrap and summarize everything up. Yeah. In response to Joven's question, after global economy, no more already. Yes, global economy is the last theme, and it's a short theme. Okay, Mr. Lok will be lecturing on that because we are taking turns to lecture. Yeah. And the other reason is because I had no wish to lecture economic history again. I'm pretty bored of lecturing it. No, actually, that's not the real reason. Okay, so yes, global economy is the final theme. If you're lucky, the A levels might cut some topics here and there. Yeah, due to the situation this year. Hey, who disliked my stream? You're gonna get it, man. Or do you want Ice Bear instead? Would that please you? I have Ice Bear also and Grizz. Okay, anyway, so to finish up my lecture previously on UN peacekeeping during the post-Coa era, let's do a quick recap before we launch into it once again. So we were looking at how UN peacekeeping changed after the Cold War. I highlighted that, hey, there were some big changes, but also some big continuities. Some continuities include there was still some element of great power politics, lack of political will, these were still there. The UN SecGen's role also always a factor. But at the same time, we also moved from more inter to intra-state conflicts. Conflicts in the post-Coa world tend to be more complex intra-state conflicts as compared to the more simpler ones during the Coa era. So change and continuity both come into play here. So remember, all these different factors that affected peacekeeping's effectiveness after the Cold War, they all came to play to varying extents depending on the crisis itself. Oi! Do you want Ice Bear? Oh, I'm sad. Hey, do you all know how many subscribers I need to monetize the streamer? It's a serious question. Okay, so the big question we want to consider for post-Coa peacekeeping is obviously whether or not the end of the Coa was a big turning point for peacekeeping, or was it more of the same? Or was it somewhere in between, some changes and some continuities? And what we have looked at so far, we have looked at actually 5 already. We have looked at the Gulf War, the Cambodian-Vietnamese conflict, the Somali Civil War. We have done Rwanda as well, and we have also done Kosovo. Okay, so today I'll finish up East Timor and then do a whole summary of UN peacekeeping after the Cold War. I think that for students, what you have to take note of is, I think that Rwanda and Somalia actually are very easy to understand. Gulf War as well. Most students struggle a bit more with understanding Kosovo and also Cambodia, but they are also easy examples. They are also important examples, which is why even though they are a bit more complex, don't neglect them completely. Okay, remember, you always need a scope of examples. $1K. You can monetize by views. 10 hours of streaming. I'll consider it. I want to run ads, Yeah, imagine this whole period of home-based learning. Yeah. Lucrative opportunity. Imagine if they get me to do GP lecture. Oh my god, man. Okay, now, so we have done Rwanda before we left for this period of home-based learning, so I'll just skim through it. I won't go into it again. We have also done after Rwanda. We have done, what did we do? We did Kosovo. Kosovo was a bit complicated, so as I said, go into it a bit further. It's not that easy to understand as compared to the rest. And then finally today, we'll cover one final case study, which is East Timor. So I'll get to that soon. Oh, so many slides. Okay, here I am, East Timor. Now, first of all, East Timor is interesting because we are once again back into Southeast Asia. Okay, you can see East Timor there on the screen, where Pen is pointing. Okay, off the tip of Indonesia, one of the islands there, very close to Australia. Okay, and this is an example that actually is useful for your Southeast Asia as well. Because some of you, when Ms. Zakia was covering the current topic, regional conflicts and cooperation, might have heard of her mention the Indonesian invasion of East Timor, and that's really what this is about. Okay, so let's zoom right into it. Now, East Timor, that's the position of East Timor, quite near Bali as well, but now cannot travel anywhere. Off the tip of Indonesia, between Indonesia and Australia, formerly a Portuguese colony, which is why I have Ronaldo over there, into the 1970s. Then, in 1974, with the wave of decolonization sweeping across the world, Portugal decided to give East Timor independence as well in 1974. However, not everyone in East Timor welcomed this decision, because some in East Timor itself wanted East Timor to be incorporated into Indonesia as part of Indonesia instead. Okay, so civil war erupted between two major factions in the 1970s after Portugal left East Timor, between the Fretilin, which supported independence, and the UTT, which supported incorporation into Indonesia. Portugal didn't want to get involved and so left the colony to decide its own fate, as colonial powers tend to do. Okay, a quick tip for if you are some kind of imperialist or dictator in the future, when the going gets tough and shit happens, just leave. Let them trash it out. It's none of your business anymore. That's what all the European colonial powers did. Okay, neighboring Indonesia was very concerned about the possible emergence of a communist state next door, because the Fretilin in East Timor were actually left-leaning, i.e. communist-leaning. So they launched an invasion in 1975, and they occupied and absorbed East Timor as a province of Indonesia in 1976. So East Timor became a province of Indonesia. Okay, the Security Council obviously met and condemned and rejected Indonesia's invasion and occupation of East Timor, ordered their withdrawal, but as is always the case, they didn't give a shit, so Indonesia did not particularly heed this at all. And the issue kind of remained unresolved into the 1990s. Throughout the late 1970s into the 1980s, it was never really a big priority for many countries, so they just let the Indonesian occupation stand for now. And Indonesia also, under Suharto, refused to let go of East Timor, but their stance eventually softened in the late 1990s. Those of you, your Southeast Asian history, Why do you think Indonesia's stance towards all these things, like occupation of, other countries and other places, softened in the late 1990s? What was happening in Indonesia in the late 1990s that would make them probably want to concentrate a bit more on domestic issues as opposed to all this foreign policy entanglements? Come, what was happening in Indonesia? Late 1990s. In Asia, in Southeast Asia in general, actually, a very big thing was happening. Change of leadership, yes, but what else? Suharto died, not yet. Suharto actually resigned in 1997. So yes, stance softened this change of leadership from Suharto to Habibie, but beyond that, what made Suharto resign? Yes, Jovan, the financial crisis, the Asian financial crisis, which you're going to learn a lot more when Ms. Zakia covers economic development, had a huge impact on many Southeast Asian and also Asian countries at that point, which is why Indonesia's stance softened, because they were having so many domestic and economic problems. So towards this issue of the occupation of East Timor, their stance softened. Okay. Ethnic cleansing. Wow. Okay, moving on. So as a result of that, the UN was sent in. Okay, because Indonesia decided that, okay, they will let the UN conduct a referendum to determine whether East Timor wanted full independence or to stay within Indonesia. So in 1999, they agreed to this, and the UN came in under UNAMED to conduct this referendum and to determine the Timorese people's wishes. That means whether they wanted independence or whether they wanted to stay as an autonomous province within Indonesia. The UN was also called to oversee this transitional period to transition East Timor towards independence and peace after this long period of occupation by Indonesia. So that was what they were meant to do: conduct a referendum and oversee a transitional period should they wish to gain independence instead of staying within Indonesia. And the results of the referendum were such that the East Timorese overwhelmingly voted for full independence in 1999 in this UN conducted referendum. But immediately after that, violence broke out amongst the pro-Indonesia elements in East Timor, who were outvoted but not happy. If you're outvoted but not happy, what do? You riot, okay, which is what they did. So the UN Security Council passed a resolution 1264 authorizing the creation of a multinational peacekeeping force, Interfed, led by Australia, to maintain order in East Timor and to respect the results of the referendum. Okay, so Interfed was meant to restore peace and order after violence broke out in East Timor as a result of this referendum, support UNAMED in its operations, and it was pretty successful because the arrival of heavily armed Australian and also Singapore took part in this peacekeeping force as well, quelled most of the violence there, and Indonesia officially recognized the results of the referendum in 1999. Okay, you can see some images of the Singapore contingent in this peacekeeping force as well. So it was a pretty successful one. The violence was quelled, and then the Security Council formed another organization, UNCTAD, in East Timor to oversee the transition to independence and gradually transfer power over to the East Timorese, ensured that elections ran smoothly, and this was finished, this peace-building mission. Go in there, quell the violence, build peace over the long term. Successful. East Timor officially became independent in May 20, 2002. Now, if you're wondering why this all sounded very smooth compared to a number of others you have heard about, and the answer is that it was. This was one of the smoother, more successful peacekeeping missions that the UN has undertaken. It's in a way quite textbook peacekeeping. There's this dispute in this province of Indonesia which they formerly occupied, so the UN conducted a referendum there. When fighting broke out between different factions, they established peace and order, and then they oversaw the transition to independence and handed over to an independent East Timorese government. Peace building and peace building in one. Okay, quite a successful mission on the whole. Okay, once again, we can think about our different factors that affected the UN's effectiveness in peacekeeping over the years and think about what factors, affected them in East Timor on the whole to make it a rather successful mission. You can see that there's a clear mandate. They had support on the ground. Indonesia didn't object. And the peacekeepers were heavily armed and managed to quell the violence. Yeah, so textbook peacekeeping in a sense, unlike many of the others that you have heard. Okay, so let me just sum up all of this before I get all of you to do a very quick exit pass. So we have looked at in chapter 6, UN peacekeeping in the post-Cold War era. And we have looked at 6 different case studies here. First of all, we looked at how, again, the UN had quite a mixed record in all of this. I left out Cambodia here. Shit, sorry. Let me add it in. Okay, Cambodia is pretty successful. Okay, so this is how we have an overall summary of UN peacekeeping in the post-Cold War era. Okay, we can see that again quite a mixed record, some pretty successful ones combined with some truly epic failures. Gulf War quite mixed because successful but it was quite controversial, and some of the rest along the way. So let's start with the Gulf War. Okay, technically successful but rather controversial because the swift and unanimous action by the Security Council and cooperation by the US and USSR, and there was also widespread international support. By then, the Cold War was ending. They all agreed that kind of Saddam Hussein was in the wrong, and so there was great support for the US-led coalition that pushed Saddam out of Kuwait and forced the Iraqis to comply with UN resolutions. Okay, so successful on the surface, but if we dig deeper, we find that it's actually a bit similar to the Korean War, because it increasingly became controversial as what became a UN-led mission eventually also kind of something turned into like a US-led invasion. It increasingly became subsumed into US foreign policy objectives, so that made many people uncomfortable as well. So even though it was successful on the surface, especially in the military sense, but yeah, the long-term ramifications of that, many people are uncomfortable with that because it was yet another case of the US kind of using the UN and the UN mission for its own foreign policy objectives. Next up, Cambodia. I forgot to include a slide of Cambodia, but as Rachel mentioned, if Cambodia is successful, then why the Khmer Rouge managed to oust the UN-led government in the end? They didn't. Okay, you need to read it, yeah. It was the other way around. The Khmer Rouge became a guerrilla force in the countryside, and after that, they kind of faded away after that. The two main factions in Cambodia that eventually formed the transition government after the UN stepped in were Funcinpec by Prince Renarit and Hun Sen's PRK. So Cambodia was relatively successful as well. Yeah. Because they managed to step in after the long period of the Vietnamese occupation of Cambodia. They managed to ensure that Cambodia transitioned towards a new coalition government after the many, many long years of the Third Indochina War. So Cambodia is actually a fairly successful one too. Moving on, we then get on to a few epic failures. Somalia and Rwanda are very bad failures in the context of the UN. In the case of Somalia, the big factors were the issue of how there was no whole state, no peace to keep, complete anarchy basically. None of the factions really bothered with the UN being there at all or respected its mandate. A clear lack of political will, especially when the US gradually withdrew after the death of 18 soldiers in Mogadishu, and other countries very soon followed suit. Clear lack of political will, couldn't deal with the chaos on the ground and didn't want to deal with the chaos on the ground. They managed to provide some humanitarian assistance but really didn't resolve the issue in any way at all, and Somalia remains a failed state today. Rwanda, probably the biggest stain in the UN's history. Huge failure. Severe lack of political will to solve the conflict by the UN Security Council, and it was in many cases very, very damning. Because when UN, the UNAMIR, came under attack, various countries started withdrawing their contingents, and the Security Council even voted to reduce the UN's strength in Rwanda to a skeleton force of 270 at the height of the killings. So they failed to prevent the genocide. Too little, too late. It was only belatedly that they realized that the situation was very, very serious. So this was really a very, very damning failure. Yeah. Clown Fiesta, yes. Actually, Somalia and Rwanda were both clown fests. Yeah. It's like textbook what not to do. Even Bosnia is also a bit that way. Next up, Kosovo, which was a follow-up from Bosnia. This one is a bit mixed because on one hand, the heavily armed KFOR, backed by NATO, the UN and NATO, managed to halt Serbian attacks on the minority Kosovo Albanians and force the Serbian president Milosevic to agree to a peace plan. So on one hand, the military aspects of things were pretty successful because this is literally on the doorstep of Europe. The European states were all very concerned and they took action very decisively under the banner of the UN. However, the performance of the civilian administration, UNIMIC, was far more mixed. They lacked manpower, lacked support, plagued by corruption. So in a sense, overall, they managed to supervise the ceasefire, but the longer-term goals of peace building were probably not met. Okay? Finally, East Timor. This was a success, like Cambodia. Another case of how, after many long years of a certain occupation, the UN managed to step in, oversee a referendum towards independence, and when violence broke out, the Australia-led Interfact quickly quelled it. And yeah, it was a successful transition to East Timor. East Timor is an independent state nowadays. It's called Timor-Leste. And yeah, successful, I would say. Aided, of course, by a very favorable international climate, post-Cold War world, widespread international support from various parties like Australia, US, Britain, etc. to stabilize the situation, and Indonesia also, at a point in time, weakened by the financial crisis, really didn't object to anything at all. So, on the whole, we come back to our final question. Was the UN effective in handling issues of international security during and after the Cold War? Once again, you have to judge. To sum up this giant chunk on peacekeeping, both during and after the Cold War, we have looked at 5 case studies during the Cold War era and 6 in the post-Cold War era. And for the post-Cold War era, remember that even though the Cold War has ended, it was not all nice and dandy and peaceful overall. There were still issues such as the juggling of big power politics, the political will of member states. All these things still remain in some form, even in the post-Cold War era. So you want to think about what big changes did the Cold War to post-Cold War period bring, and at the same time, what continued and persisted from the Cold War era into the post-Cold War era. And that concludes this giant chunk on peacekeeping. We have 2 final chapters left on the UN, the International Court of Justice and UN reforms, which we will cover in week 5. I also promised to fix my resolution and improve my home setup because I really hadn't had much time to think about it yet, but once I think about it, it will be greatly improved. I love creating setups. Okay, next lesson, Grizz or Ice Bear will be here. Before you leave, I need y'all to do an exit pass. No, not hand sanitizer. You can sanitize yourself at home if you want. The exit pass is linked on the usual history Google site as well, embedded into it, as I always do. Okay. Is 3 quick questions. In case you cannot see it, I will cut and paste it into the live chat too. Okay, so do your exit passes by, actually, it just takes 5 minutes. It's not going to take very long. So do remember to do your exit passes. If you have anything that you want to check with me, please feel free to do so. I will take any questions that you might have as you do your exit pass for the lecture. Yes. Let me cut and paste it into the various chats. Ooh, wrong link. Okay, do remember to do the exit pass. Don't need answer key one. They're very basic questions. If you cannot remember, GG already. Okay, yes, exit pass. Oh, you, what's your question? Let me scroll up. I don't see it. Oh, in response to Rachel's question, yes, Hun Sen, you see, the thing about peacekeeping is that it doesn't mean that their objectives were to transition Cambodia to peace and install a new coalition government that both sides could accept. So that was what happened in Cambodia after the Vietnamese occupation, after the Jakarta Informal Meetings, Paris Peace Accords. They sent in the UN managed to maintain peace, transition, hold elections, blah, 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 blah. There was a coalition government between Renarit and Hun Sen. So yeah, that's the UN's job done. How a dictator like him got into power, that was many years later. Hun Sen staged a subsequent coup in, if I'm not wrong, 1997, if you recall your Southeast Asian history, and he took over for good in Cambodia after that. That was none of the UN's fault. Yeah, it came after that. So the UN did its job. It transitioned, Cambodia to peace, had a coalition government in place, but who could have anticipated that after that? Yes, one of them, Hun Sen, managed to once again seize power and become the dictator of Cambodia till today. Yeah, not something they could have anticipated, let's just say. Okay, do your exit passes. Yeah, if you want to chat, also can. Actually, one day we should have a Zoom lunch party, mukbang. Yay! Then we can watch each other eat. It would be very fun. Okay, thank you everyone. And once you are done with your exit passes, you can head off to lunch. Have a great day of learning ahead. I'm gonna go get my lunch too. What should I have for lunch? I need to improve my setup. My desk is too cramped. I can't fit everything. Okay, thank you. Bye. Okay, I always prefer to do my lectures live and tutorials live because I think that in this period of 1 month where you won't have much actual human interaction, especially with your teachers, it's important for us to be seen. So I will always have a live presence. Okay, I'm not a big fan of recorded lectures, so you will not get recorded ones from me. I mean, the live stream is recorded and will be uploaded after that, but I do think that the live interaction is important so that I can take questions. And yes, the human element is important.